This is Gemara Sanhedrin Daf Mem Aleph, and all the learning for this month. The month of Tevis has been generously sponsored by a close friend of the Daf as Lezchut Elias Neshama for Rav Aryeh ben Rav Ya'akov V'siyata Dishmayo. As we round out of this Heilige month of the Neshama, should be Oila higher and higher in Gan Eden Shamayla, closer to the Kisei HaKavod, as well as all learning should be as Chosr for Shlema for Tinaik. We're holding on Mem Amud Beis. We're about 14 lines from the bottom, the two dots. Rabbi Yosi Omer continues the Gemara. The Rabbi Yosi argues in the Tanakama. The Tanakama said that there were 7 questions that are going to be asked to the Edom, and Rabbi Yosi disagrees. Rabbi Yosi says there are just 3 basic questions: day of the week, the Shah, the hour, and the location. Tanya, Rav Yosi the Chachamim. So a Brisa elaborates a little bit more on the din of the Mishnah. The Rav Yosi told the Chachamim, L'divreichem, Mishabav, if someone comes up, and says, Emes Hargoi. Someone says, yesterday, the person who's being accused killed the victim. Amar Lai, Beizah Shavua. Do we ask him which 7-year period? Beizah Shana, Beizah Chaydesh, Bekama B'Chaydesh. Makes no sense. Of course not. He said it was yesterday. So Amar Lai, they responded, Dvarecha, but according to the way you're saying it, Mishrav Amar Achshav Argai. Someone comes in and says, we killed someone right now. Amar Lai, Beizah Yayim, Beizah Shah, Beizah Makayim. So it must be that there's a protocol. Protocol, by their very definition, means sometimes it's not necessary, but l'maisa, we always do it. Kid Rav Shimon ben Elazar. Says the Gemara of Rav Yosi. And according to Rav Yosi, Emes Hargai Shchiach b'Rav Duyos. According to Rav Yosi, it's common that most of the time for the Edom to say that it was yesterday. So therefore, we're only going to need the 3 questions. But responding on behalf of Rav Yosi, but to say that it just happened, that is not as common. We continue the next part of the Mishnah that the Dayanim say to the Edom, Makirim Atem Oisai. Do you recognize him? Says the Gemara, Tanu Rabbanan, Makirim Atem Oisai. Do you recognize him? Nachi Har Yisrael Arag. Did he kill a guy? Did he kill a yid? His race and boy, did he give him Asra? Kibul of Asra? And did he accept Asra? Hitratzalim Misai. Did he say that, okay, I'm just going to be Chayim Misa? Hemes B'toich Dibur. Did he kill within the amount of time of B'toich Dibur? In the case of Avodah Zarah, someone who worshipped idols, that's Mi'avad. We ask him, what idol did he worship? Lip Aravad, Lemerkulis Avad, different names of the Zarah, Ubamavad, with what did he serve? Bezibach, Bekiter, Benizach, B'Shachavaya, all different questions that we ask about the act of serving the Avodah Zarah. Continues the Gemara, Omar Ula. After going through all the different ways of asking questions about someone who is Chayim Misa, asks Ula min ayin lahasara min atayra. Ula goes back fundamental, and how do we know? Shenemar, the pasuk says, someone who takes his sister, daughter of his father, and he sees her nakedness. Says the Gemara, what does it mean, vira? And he sees, someone chayamisa, for seeing, of course not. Rather, it means that they actually had relations. But rather, what the pasuk is teaching us, that you're not chayev achiru taimo shel davar until they explain to him the reason. And if this is the reason when it comes to kares, which we don't really need such a mekar, says the Gemara Taneo Inyan lemalkus. Let's explain this regarding to malkus. This is going to be a mekar for the Chiyah Misa in such a case. The Gemara continues the tabline of Memal from Alf to Echizki Atana, Chiyazin Ishal Reu Lahargoy Ba'arma, Shehitru Bai Vadainu Meze. We see this Asra is still called Amazing. A third makar for Hasra. Very Shmuel Tana Moitzi Hamoitziim Oisai Mikoishish Eitzim. Those who found him gathering grudge, Hasrubai, Vadainu Mikoishish. Devei Rabbi Tana, a fourth and final makar, quoting the pasuk Al Davar Asher Ana Al Iske Dibur. Says the pasuk reason that he was afflicted, and we'll learn out. Al Davar Asher Ana Al Iske Dibur means from words that were said. So we have four different makairais. That's the only time there's going to be a Chiyah Misa is if there was a full Hasra. Says the Gemara, why do we need all four Mekairais? Because Rahman Achaisai, have Amin, I know what I thought. Chavim Alkasin, but Chavim Misa Slai, because Rahman Achayasin. Because Rahman Achayasin, have Amin on immediately say if the kill. Killing by sword is of the lower Chiyuve Misa of Skilach, the Chamura Imalai, Sricha. Tarti bin Iskalim Lamali. But finally, why do we need two cases talking about Niskalim? Those who are Chayiv Skila. Says the Gemara, Rav Shimon Lasui Nisrafim. Rav Shimon holds, even comes to include someone who's Chayiv Misav Sreif. The Rabbanim Milsadas Vikav Chaymer. Tarach Vikasav Lakra. You say that even things that we can learn from a Kav Chaymer, the Torah sometimes goes and writes them in Psukim verbatim. Says just read about Skila. Says it's not going to help us because they're all things that really we can learn out from Kal V'Chaimer, but we're quoting psukim about them nonetheless. And we continue the two dots on the first white line. Says the Gemara Hitter Atzmai Lemisa. If the one who committed the crime released himself to execution without Asra. Minolan says the Gemara, where do we know this? Amar Ravi Tema Chizki Amar Krao Meis HaMeis Sheyatir Atzer Lemisa. That's the only time there'll be the Chiyah, that there's no Chiyah Misa, until he's Yatir Atzer Lemisa, and there will be a Chiyah Misa. Amar Rav Chanan Eidei Naira Hamurasa Shehozmu Eina Ragin. If someone is Eid Zaymimin on a Naira Marasa, a woman that had Irison and she's accused of committing zinos. Since you're coming to say the Asr Razin, V'ha'asruba, says Gemara, I don't understand, but if not, then how are you going to kill her? Answers Gemara, Bisha Chavira, I'll leave it to Rav Yisrael Rav Yehuda, the Tanya. Rav Yisrael Rav Yehuda, Omer, Chaver, Ein, Sarech, Hasra, a Yuchnik, Shita. Rav Yisrael Yehuda, if you should learn it, Nasal, Havi, Havchem, and Shekel, and Bezit. Says the Gemara that the whole impetus and purpose of Asra is just to differentiate between Shagi and Bezit. Says the Gemara, Rav Yisrael Yehuda hold that a Chaver, someone who knows a Torah, does not need a Hasra. Te'enu continues the Gemara, Loi Mikatzli, V'i Mikatzli. Says they are very good for themselves and that one with everyone else. She had the Achel. And the rule, of course, she had the Achel is not called. And he does. So what are you going to do? Says the Gemara, you're right. Tachanami kamar mitoich, because she now ragim sheichon lemer loisra abayla banu. Because they could have claimed they come loisra abayla. Afki ain't on our regis havla either she had the achla azimoy. Al beisha chavera the kamla and the katle. Lisa Yehuda Eichem Ishkachas. According to Yehuda, we come. You can have to allow them to go. Eichem Ishkachas. Like shezinsa v'chazav v'zinsa. Ay, v'yichaylim v'yichayles loymar loisa albayla sheni banu shezinsa mival risha inami shezinsa mikroivel ma'isha naim rasa did not get says marfilu nesu nami, so says more fundamentally why naim rasa nesu is the same thing. Alafilu hay do yasva to say yicholam loisa albayla banu. The reason is because even this one we're able to say loisa albayla as usually they're coming. Amar Rav Chista. Continues the Gemara with Rav Chista, which now dives in to the secondary questions that we learned in the Mishnah, and what happens if those supplemental questions, those levels of Drishas v'Chakirais, what happens if those end up being contradicting one aid to the next? Amar Rav Chista, Echlamr b'Sayev Hargu v'Echad Amr ba'Aririn Hargu. Again, this is a fundamental way of learning the supplemental questions, which is what? They're both agreeing that there was a murder that happened. One said it was with a knife, and one said it was with a battle axe. Ein zeh nachain. This is not a good eidos, and therefore it is not kosher. If they both agree with the utensil, just different color, then hari zeh nachain. Meisvei, ask the Gemara. Nachain, she nachain. Pasuk says if it's nachain, if it's firm, to teach us that the two Eidim have to agree firmly. Echad Aimer b'sayiv haragai, v'echad Aimer ba'arir haragai, echad Aimer kilev shechayrim, v'echad Aimer kilev levanim. Ein ze nachain. So the Brisa is lumping both of these cases together. We just said that if they're disagreeing about the weapon, then ein ze nachain. If they're agreeing about the color, then nachain. But the Brisa lumps both of them together. Says the Gemara, Tir Gemara Rav Chisda, Besudar Shechanakai Bai. Rav Chisda explained, we're dealing with a sudar, a kerchief, which he strangled the victim, the Hainu Sairif Va'aririn. And that's a form of Sairif, a knife, and a battle axe, meaning they're both really agreeing to which weapon it was. They argue about his color of his shoes. The case is where he kicked him and he killed him. Therefore, the question is not a complete sidebar question, but rather involved in the eidos of the actual murder. So there was a story of Ubadi ben Zakkai, and Ben Zakkai examined certain of the stems of the figs. Even though this is a minor detail, Ben Zakkai questioned about it. The case is in which he cut off a fig on Shabbos. That is Kufa, the reason why he's Chaim Isa. It's not a minor detail at all. Ask the Gemara about Tanya into the Brisa, but the Brisa says that he killed him under a Te'ina. So of course that is the case. So therefore the fact what types of figs they were is irrelevant. We're talking about a case where it testified that he was stabbed with the Te'ina, meaning that was mamish, the weapon. It wasn't just a location of where the murder happened, but this was the weapon itself. Tashema, says the Gemara, if one said that the stem of the fig was thin, and one said it was thick, where they argue on the color of the figs. Says the Gemara, Elam Rav Yosef, mi ben Zakkai, loisev inish. From Ben Zakkai, can you actually ask anything? Shani Ben Zakkai, the b'dikas chachiros b'mashvila. Ben Azai was unique that his b'dikas, his supplemental questions, were the same level according to Ben Azai as the original questions. That's why he was so intent on these questions. Says the Gemara, who is this Ben Zakkai? Ben Zakkai. My Ben Zakkai. Im le Rav Yochanan Ben Zakkai. 10 lines on the bottom. First word line is Ben Zakkai. Miyavi was Sanhedrin. Was he part of Sanhedrin? Vatani kol she'odaisav shel Rav Yochanan Ben Zakkai. Me'av esrim shana v'arbaim shana. Excuse me. All the years of Yochanan Ben Zakkai was 120 years. Arbaim shana for 40 years. I was like Brahmati, he was in business. Mem shana lamat, arbim shana limeid, v'tanya arbim shana kodim chorban v'ayis gol Sanhedrin v'yashalei b'chano. So clearly, it could not have been that he was part of the Sanhedrin. This doesn't work out. I mean, you think about Rav Dimi, Leimer shlotanu dini kanasais, sagadaitach elo shlotanu dini nefashais. So says the Gemara, how could it be Rav Yochanan Ben Zakkai? The Tanaim Shechabris in Mikdash Heskin Rav Yochanan Ben Zakkai. It was after the Chorban. So who is this Rav Yochanan ben Zakkai that we're talking about that's involved in the Sanhedrin? Ben Zakkai de Alma. So therefore, the obvious point, Karlei Rebbe ben Zakkai. Why we just call him ben Zakkai? Vatani Ma'isa Bali Rav Yochanan ben Zakkai. Vokseteina. El Talmud Yosha the Rabbi Have Vermilsa Mistavelu Taima. He said over a reason. It wasn't actually Rav Yochanan ben Zakkai. It was a Talmud and Mistavelu Taima, and that's the reason why we took it for something. Why? V'kavua b'shmei, because they took his words, the fact that he repeated it over for the Rebbe. Kavua b'shmei, they said it over in the name of Rav Yochanan ben Zakkai. Ki Avi Lamed ben Zakkai, Havikar le Kitalmud Hayoshav nei Rabbi. When Rav ben Zakkai, Ki Avi Lamed, when he was learning ben Zakkai, Havikar le ben Zakkai would call him Kitalmud Hayoshav nei Rabbi. Ki Avi Limud, and when he was teaching, he would say Havikakari Le Rav Yochanan ben Zakkai, ki kari le ben Zakkai al shem de me kara. The beginning of Chikar le Rav Yochanan ben Zakkai is when al shem de ashta. So different parts of Rav Yochanan ben Zakkai's life he's referred to either as ben Zakkai or Rav Yochanan ben Zakkai. Continues the Gemara quoting the Mishnah of the story with ben Zakkai. Maiso is the story with ben Zakkai that was to badik v'chulu mabin chakir subediko. Says the Mishnah, what's the difference? Now, when it comes to integral questions, if they mess up, then the whole edus is thrown out. When it comes to the supplemental, then it is not. Says the Gemara, Maya afilu. What is the afilu in the Mishnah? The afilu is, says the Gemara, Shnayim Oimrim. Excuse me, Maya afilu Shnayim Oimrim. Pshita, ki amar echad ein yedea, idusan kayemes. Ki amri beitrei nami, idusan kayemes. So it should be the same thing. Amar Rav Shishas Arisha Kayvach Kamar. Bechakirois, Davka bechakirois. It's going on the Risha when it comes to the standard, the 7 questions. Afilu shnayim amri yadanu. V'achlameni yodei I do some betila. Kiman kravi kiva demakar shleish l'shnayim. That's the chiddush of the Mishnah. Amar Rabba, excuse me. V'ha idus katani kayem is katani. But the Mishnah says the idus is standing. So it can mean that one of them doesn't know the regular 7 standards. Elamar Rava, he comes to in the Mishnah. Afilu bechakirais, even by the 7 questions. Shnayim oimrim yadan, v'echad oimrim yodei idus kayemes. Come on, the like Rabbi Akiva. Now it's going now like Rabbi Akiva. So says the Gemara, let's go a little bit deeper and figure out what is the difference between the standard and the supplemental, the Jewish Chakiris of Kan Rav Safar Tanu, Sanhedrin. They were learning Sanhedrin by Rabbah in the Yeshiva of Rabbah. Paga Behu Rabbi Rachama Amr Lehu Mayam Rita Ba Sanhedrin Tvei Rabbah. What are they saying over there regarding Sanhedrin and Yeshiva's Rabbah? Amr Le Amam Rina Ba Sanhedrin Grade Asa. What are you asking about Sanhedrin Tvei Rabbah? What it would say if we learned Sanhedrin on our own? Umay kash l'cham l'am. Eldik tani. You know what our kasha would be? Mavi chakir z'vedikos. Chakir z'echad min yodea. There's a betela. Vedikos z'echad min yodea. Vafilu shnayim amrin on yodea. Do z'kayames. So what's the chilek to the Jewish of the chakiris? That's the question I would have asked as the Gemara. Mechli. I divide the daraisa. Ma'ishla chakiris. Ma'ishla vedikos. If they're both dini daraisa, why is there any difference? Amrulei, so you respond to Rabbi Rachama, Chiashta, Bechakira, is Amrachel, any idea to Zebetel? Why? Dabalai Dushiata, Yachalazima, Bedikos, Atamrachad. Any idea to Zakam is why? Because they did Yachalazima. So it all ties back. Whether this is Edus that could have been Muzam, Homer Lakiachi, Amrita Batuva. Says Gemara, 1 second. Yachi Amrita Ba. If you said about this halacha, Tuva Amrita Ba. You're saying a lot. Amrulei mitivusa demar amrinuba tuvusa minemusa mituvasa demar amrinuba tuva. Because of your goodness, you have to say a lot about zalacha. Minizimusa demar loy amrinuba loy chada. But if you would have been harsh to us, we would not have even been able to say one halacha, and that's able to learn out for that which was being taught that day in the yeshiva Devei Rabbah. Pick it up from the 2 dots with Siyata Dishmaya.